It's finally a windy day here, and now it's not a great scene, but I'm going to talk to you today about putting into the wind right after the intro. Okay guys, listen, I know it's not the greatest scene. I had to pick, it's windy, and I had to pick a spot up on a hill in between Walmart and Publix and all this stuff, but the wind's whipping through here. It's at least 10 miles an hour, gusts up to probably 20 miles an hour, and I wanted to talk about putting in the wind, and this is a perfect time. So one of the things, I had to tape up my stand. The wind keeps blowing it over. That's how fast the gusts are going. But so, okay, I'm cold, it's windy, so let's jump into it. The key about putting into the wind or putting with wind is understanding nose angle. And the thing you've got to be very aware of is whether that nose gets up and down. If you're putting into the wind and you get the nose up, what's going to happen? It's just like out on the beach. If you try to throw a disc, it's just going to pick up and go. So if I'm back here, and I'm using the glitch right now because it's got a lot of glide, which means the wind's really going to affect it. So if I'm trying to putt into this basket right here, we're pretending the hoop's the basket. If I throw it straight at it and I get a little up, you see how, hey, I came in the back way. You see how the wind is getting under it and lifting it. So what you will see if people get the nose up when they're putting into the wind is that disc will lift up, maybe go over the basket, or even if it gets too bad, pick up and blow away. So you want to make sure you're at least flat. Now if you get too low nose down, it's going to do the opposite and it's just going to sit on it. So if I try to get this really low, let me go back a little bit, and I try to putt with the nose down, it just drops because the wind is just smacking it down. So the key is you really want to make sure that you can keep it nice and flat and push it right through the wind as best you can. Okay, so in the wind, glide makes a difference. This glitch, one of the things people love about it is they just glide and sail forever. But in the wind, it can be really dangerous because it's going to pick up and lift and go where you don't want it to go. That's why you may want to go with something a little less glidey. Here's a P2. I think this one is the glitch has a 1.7 glide. This one is a 2.3 glide. And so it's going to fight the wind a little bit better. It's not going to want to sail around. That's very helpful. Now, whether it comes to stable disc or not stable, if you're inside 30 feet or so, the stability is not going to be that important, but it does help fight the wind a little bit more. So realize with the wind, your glide is going to be a big factor in how well that putter cuts through the air. That was one of the reasons why I switched from a birdie, which I love my birdie, especially for flick putts, but it's a big sailboat. If that wind gets it, it just wants to go flying. And I found that in the wind, the birdie was not the best. So that was one of the main reasons why I switched to the Berg, because it's got like no glide to it, so I could punch through the wind and not be as worried about that wind getting on it. Because one of the things that happens when I throw that forehand flick, I expose the top of the plate, and a lot of times it'll just grab it and knock it down. So I need to make sure that when I'm throwing this, even with the flick, that I do it nice and flat into the wind versus getting that flight plate exposed to the wind. So let's talk about the difference between 7 glide, a 3 glide, and I think a 1 or 2 glide. This is basically a brick, and this is basically a sail. Of course, as soon as I say that, the wind kind of dies down, so we're going to have to wait a minute for the wind to pick up. Okay, so I'm just going to show, and guys, you know this, if you've ever thrown a Frisbee on the beach, this is what happens when you get a Frisbee that likes to glide, and you throw it into the wind, it just wants to sail. Whereas if you got a medium one, it'll cut through the wind better, and then you get something like the Berg, and it just tries to push through the wind. So I always recommend that if you're going to putt in the wind, play in the wind, you might want to go with something a little less glidey. Hey, heck, for instance, you maybe want to do something like putt with a pig or a harp or something like one of those mid-ranges, or even a zone, something that's going to be able to push through the wind a little bit more. So even that one, I got the nose up a little bit, and it just wanted to pick up and ride a little. So now I'm just going to throw some into the wind, because let's face it, the headwind is the scariest putt. And I've added a pig to the mix here because, like the Berg, doesn't have a lot of glide. And it might be a good choice when you're getting into the headwinds, in the headwind, in a windy situation, to pull something out that doesn't have as much glide. If it's really windy, something like a pig or a berg might be a great choice for you. Harp, zone, your choice. All right, here we go. Oh, God. Hey, see, the pig fought through it. The berg fought through it. Yeah, see, the low glide ones didn't get yanked up as much as the glitch did. Once again, proving my point. You don't want a lot of glide when you're playing in the wind. Okay, now we have a tailwind. It's ripping behind me. It's just pushing this way. What's going to happen if I get the flight plate, if I get the bottom exposed to the wind, it's going to act like a parachute and kind of pull it along, which might not be bad as long as I'm on line. But what if I throw it a little high? It picks up and it's going to carry right over the basket, and it could go a long ways. So once again, even with the tailwind, we're still trying to putt pretty flat. Now, one of the things that's going to happen if you get the nose up on this, which we tend to do a lot of times when we're throwing, that tailwind's going to grab it and make it sink. If you watch any of the coverage, they'll talk about how in the wind, if there's a tailwind, you tend to need to aim a little higher. So I'm going to get back a little. So I know with this tailwind, I'm going to drive the birdie. I know with the tailwind, I'm going to have to aim up above it. I got my nose up just a little bit because I know the wind's going to push it down. So I go up and it drops it just like a rock. Whereas if I keep this, let me do the glitch. I'm going to get the nose down so the back can push it. Watch what happens. It just wants to carry it and it doesn't drop. It wants to push. Now watch when I try to putt back with this wind. It was dropping hard. I'm aiming over the ring. Didn't even get it there. That wind is just slamming it down. I'm going up high and it's just dropping right in there. Can you see it just sailing and falling? So the biggest thing to remember when dealing with the wind is to know the direction it's going so that you can counteract that and understand what your disc is going to do. Headwind is going to want to lift the disc if you expose the bottom of it. If you expose the nose of it, the top of it, into the wind, it's probably going to push it down. And the reverse if the wind is behind you. You get the back plate showing like this, wind's coming this way, it's going to push it down. Whereas if you get it like this, it's going to act like a parachute, grab it and push it that way. Okay, Pete, but what about from the angles? Let's move this out of the way. So now, but what if it's coming from an angle? Let's say now I'm putting in this direction here. Well, look what's happening, even if I'm holding this like this. The wind is wanting to get under this and grab it this way. So how do I counteract that? Well, I need to, once again, probably try to throw as flat as possible to get through the wind. I can throw it on anhyzer like this, so what's happening is the wind's hitting here, but what's going to happen is that wind is going to grab it and throw it to the ground. So I've got to decide, am I going to go for accuracy and try to just burn it into the ground and then drop it in for a 2? Or am I going to try to throw it very precisely on line and maybe get a 1? The problem with wind is you just never know. Even if you hit it dead solid in the center with a good putt, that wind could, as soon as it hits the chains, could grab it and blow it out of the basket. Scores are going to be higher when you're playing in the wind. Now let's say I'm throwing, now the wind's this way. If you naturally throw a putt with a hyzer, this wind is going to make it sink and drop. So often you'll see people putting on this crosswind and they're hitting the bottom of the cage or they're hitting the pole because they just naturally put a little hyzer on it. That wind grabs it and knocks it down. If you putt and hyzer, look at that, it's trying to grab it and rip it right out of my hand. If I go to putt it, it's just going to act like a sail and just take off going that way. So the two things you need to be aware of, the wind direction and how you're going to have the attitude and really the altitude of your disc. Most of the time you're going to want to keep it nice and flat, but then you also got to decide what kind of angle. If it's coming from the side, the angle of your disc, so here we go. Let's say the wind's coming from this direction. If I have it on this angle right here, it doesn't matter if I've got up or down a lot of this, but what's happening, as soon as I hit this plate with the wind coming this way, it's going to drop. Whereas if I have it this way, it's going to lift and go that way. So when there's a crosswind, the most important thing you've got to think about is your angle of your disc. When it's headwind or tailwind, you need to think about the angle of your nose because those are going to be affected the most. And so then it's just a matter of getting out. If you can find a windy day to go out and practice, really start to hone what it feels like and what you need to do to combat the wind. And then you also probably have to have the proper expectations that you're not going to play or putt as well in the wind because it's just harder. And so oftentimes it's smarter to lay up and do a drop-in putt than to go for it and have the wind grab it and send it 50 yards past your, 50 yards, okay, that's a little much, 50 feet past the basket. Well, to be honest, a tailwind putt is the easiest of all the putts because you just need to aim it a little higher and usually you'll drop down below it as long as you don't get the nose up and it's not blowing too hard. But now I'm on the other side of the camera, other side of the basket, and I'm putting into the headwind, and the headwind's a lot harder. That's one of the things you might want to be thinking about too when you're approaching a basket. If you can land on the downwind side of things, it'll make your life a lot easier too. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. Bottom line, you need to be aware of what the wind's doing when you're approaching the basket for your putting, and then you need to take the adjustments to make sure that you're on line with what you want to do. And in the end, if it gets really bad, just lay up under the basket and drop it in and walk away with a safe par, hopefully. Okay guys, so there you go. It's windy, nasty, I'm frozen. This is probably a little rushed. Please leave me some questions and comments down below. I'd love to help you out some more. Maybe I'll revisit this. The problem with having to do a wind guide is to do it in the wind. Makes it kind of rough. So anyway, I hope this helps you out. Let's start the conversation about it. And if you haven't, please subscribe. That would help me out a lot, and give me a thumbs up. And I really do hope to see you out on the course.